This is my conference paper, Road to Hell, a feminist retrospective of automobility in the haunting of Hill House. The automobile is one of the most impactful inventions of all time for its contribution to America's overall growth and economy. By allowing pieces of the individual to be paraded down quiet streets or busy highways, a choice made by the owner of the vehicle, the automobile serves as not only a mode of transportation, but as an extension of property as well. Traditionally, the car is used to dictate two things about a person: their status and their capabilities. Society leans towards stereotyping drivers through prejudicial mentalities passed down by previous generations. The objective of stereotyping is to humiliate the targeted group, not to empower them. Furthermore, women drivers have been stereotyped for many reasons, but the 1950s delivered nuanced opinions on driving as it became globally recognized. Shirley Jackson, a renowned author in the Gothic genre, uses driving in The Haunting of Hill House to curate a psychoanalysis of the feminine mystique masked as a cliché ghost story. It is important to situate the novel within the historical context of gendered mobility along with Jackson's personal relationship with driving. Before the automotive industry rose to prominence, the idea of a woman riding a horse was deemed scandalous. While not directly prohibited, astride horseback riding seemingly threatened women's virtue. By limiting the functionality of horseback riding, women's freedom to move independently was greatly impacted. Animal-powered transport like carriages and wagons became an expensive but effective alternative to horseback riding as it allowed the rider to have a designated seat inside of the vehicle. True vehicular autonomy became accessible with horseless vehicles, the automobile. With automobiles, the physical demands for transportation were different, so traditional practices of courtship and chaperoning became outdated. Gender roles fluctuated as women gained mobility and autonomy that they did not have before, a phenomenon that was indirectly discouraged by automobile manufacturers who were not motivated to lose out on potential sales. Originally wanting to promote women as passengers, car manufacturers shifted to promoting women as drivers because it allowed them to perform household duties more efficiently than without a car. Women's automobility's gradual acceptance was motivated by its use in strengthening the nuclear family and out of the necessity for women's work during World War I and World War II. Car manufacturers elected to use women's bodies in their advertisements to cater to male demographics rather than marketing to both audiences. Women were portrayed as an accessory to the car to showcase how much prettier they looked outside of it. Early car marketing was used to not only sexually humiliate women, but to also promote negative perceptions of the feminine physique, as many advertisements depicted women walking instead of driving to maintain their slim figures. If the advertisement did feature a woman inside of the car, she was nearly always in the passenger seat. By World War II, the casual usage of marketable propaganda would inspire radical misogynists into scapegoating the feminine body into something to both ogle and abhor. The early 20th century brought many historical events that would be the inspiration for a lot of the misogynistic imagery surrounding women drivers. Despite how women played many crucial roles behind the wheel through medical and supply transport, many women were able to showcase their competence by joining the workforce while their husbands were overseas. Driving women did not automatically threaten the American dream as many advertised in the imagery. In fact, the American dream, which often coincides with nuclear society, was within closer reach than ever before because automobility allowed women to cater to the entire household by bringing the kids to school or toting groceries from the supermarket. Nevertheless, new arguments emerged during the Second World War when the demand for rationing occurred. Limits on gasoline, oil, and rubber led extremists to scapegoat women for a national issue that was beyond anyone's control, most likely caused by the government declaring essential and non-essential driving. One image depicts a sailor shouting, "Atta girl, waste your gas. Don't pay any attention to that gas rationing stuff. Nuts to the war. Be a gas chiseler. Grab all the gas you can. What's your name, Fräulein? We'll put you down for a Nazi medal." The suffix "lin" is a diminutive word meant to minimize the subject it is preceding. Fräulein roughly translates to little lady, a nickname meant to demean women while comparing them to war criminals. Ultimately, women and other minority groups are predisposed to scapegoating because society craves answers that are obtained through preconceived notions. After the Second World War ended and the automotive industry expanded to recreation, homogenized misogyny became easier to combat. Women writers are largely responsible for encouraging automobility among women by implementing it into literature and their daily lives. Deborah Clark claims in her book that to be an American is to exercise automobility, and to be an American woman writer is to articulate its place in the life and literature of the nation. Not every literary depiction of the car is considered positive, which is proven in Hill House, but it mirrors the reality of operating a machine that weighs approximately 2 tons. Owning a car bestows the driver the responsibility of making choices at every turn, and the glorification of automobile culture begins with the image of liberation. Conversely, Jackson used her personal experiences with the car and autonomy to craft Eleanor's character in Hill House. Jackson's involvement in the feminist movement was involuntary. She frequently refuted claims that she was a political writer, even though her writing naturally executed societal critique. Her discretions are often embedded in her work, with the most negative parts being more influential than others. Jackson's mother, Geraldine, was a notable influence on the inclusion and absence of maternal characters in her work. Her marriage to Stan Hyman was also significant material for Jackson's work, as it was widely publicized in her biographies and through general infamy. Michael Wilson points out Hyman's impact within her fiction. Unequal constrictions of domesticity, domineering, and self-righteously foolish and adulterous husbands emerge immediately and continue to develop across Jackson's sequence of novels. Jackson suffered greatly in her marriage, both physically and mentally. The household was anything but nuclear, despite that being one of Jackson's biggest ambitions. Hyman was overly critical of Jackson's writing, as he was also an author, even though Jackson's writing was directly funding the household. Jackson's struggles with weight, drug addiction, and Hyman's infidelity outwardly contributed to her mental health struggles, resulting in her taking the anger out on Hyman's student mistresses. Marriage and motherhood noticeably took a toll on the mental health of many women in the early 20th century, as they were granted freedom with automobility, yet shamed for desiring any form of escape. Unlike her husband, Jackson was a licensed driver and was able to freely exercise automobility. She would notably chauffeur Hyman to work while continuing to perform the rest of the household duties. Automobility became one of the most freeing aspects of her life. It was a pursuit that neither her husband nor society could take from her, a feat many women of the 1950s struggled with because of limited access to expansive resources like mental health services and financial independence. Women were officially granted permission to vote with the 19th Amendment during the First World War, yet the road to equality was paved in solitude by individuals like Jackson. Angela Haig further argues by focusing on her female characters' isolation, loneliness, and fragmenting identities, their simultaneous inability to relate to the world outside themselves or to function autonomously, and their confrontation with an inner emptiness that often results in mental illness. Jackson displays in pathological terms the position of many women in the 1950s. Jackson and many others could have lived fulfilling lives if not for the suffocating standards of early American society that revoked them of autonomy. The original controversy surrounding women drivers was to protect them and others because women were deemed incapable of understanding such complex subjects, thus blurring the lines between protection and oppression by society's need to control women through infantilization. Jackson highlights Eleanor's struggles with infantilization and maternalization throughout Hill House, one of them being the argument with Carrie and her husband over the car. But suppose little Lenny got sick or something, and we needed a car to get her to the doctor. Carrie's husband maternalizes Eleanor by mentioning her sister and niece's health and expects her to empathize because they are related. He is showing his role of patriarch of the household by inserting himself into the sisters' discussion and deducing Eleanor's existence to nothing but a caregiver. Carrie, on the other hand, infantilizes Eleanor by placing herself in the maternal role. Moreover, some of the argument takes place without Eleanor because Carrie deems it too improper for Eleanor to have any knowledge of sexual experimentation due to her marital status. Jackson is providing critique on how women were expected to remain virtuous while fulfilling their wifely duties for their husband, which more often than not includes bearing children. If a woman was not married, their existence was inhibited by their independence. In short, Jackson uses the car as a euphemism for Eleanor's sexuality. The requirements for women drivers were very clear: enhance the daily routine of the patriarch, as Jackson did for her own husband, and the household would have the unity needed to thrive. Although it may seem that Jackson driving Hyman around was empowering, it only solidified a routine that revolves around him, revoking her of the autonomous status that driving is supposed to provide. The dynamic between wife and husband is thus maternalized by husbandly incompetence, masked as masculinity. Jackson observes maternal relationships in many of her texts derived from her relationship with Geraldine. Instead of being maternalized for having children or through an imbecilic husband in marriage, she is forced into the maternal role by her own mother. The mother-daughter caregiver dynamic notably haunts Eleanor throughout the story. Lynn Evans further argues the maternal figure of Jackson's text is thus identified as the beginning and end point of Eleanor's existence, as well as the central barrier to Eleanor's entrance to a heteronormative world. Additionally, when Eleanor is shunned by the rest of the tenants, Mrs. Montague inserts herself into a maternal role by alerting the family of Eleanor's whereabouts and volunteering Arthur to safely drive Eleanor home. But Dr. Montague argues that she must do it alone. Jackson is using the car to represent Eleanor in this scenario, as Mrs. Montague fears that Eleanor needs to be protected from herself. In both scenes, there are characters making judgments for Eleanor because it is under the assumption that she is incapable of doing so, yet she makes the final decisions both times. The characters in Hill House are constantly jungling between infantilizing and maternalizing Eleanor because Jackson is using them to represent the oppressive mindsets geared towards women in early 20th century society. Misogynists are historically threatened by women who do not conform because they are contributing to the nuclear or because they are not contributing to the nuclear or patriarchal identity that is expected. Eleanor does not conform to societal expectations because she is unmarried, childless, and technically homeless. The car ride to Hill House is purposely drawn out by Jackson to emphasize the beginning of Eleanor's character arc. Jackson's decision to expand on Eleanor's journey to Hill House is bold, considering the story is about a haunted house, not a haunted car, but is a recognizable literary device that successfully evokes emotion from the reader by the end of the story. Eleanor is introduced as a character to sympathize with, thus allowing the reader to develop an emotional, almost maternal attachment to her. Moreover, Eleanor's first and final moments in the car contain rush lines concerning being chased by the authoritative figures in her life. No one, she thought, can catch me now. They don't even know which way I'm going. The rush stream of thoughts juxtapose each other in both scenes. When the first line is used, Eleanor is elated because she has successfully taken the car into her possession. Jackson repeats the line in one of the final scenes, with Eleanor's tone shifting to defeat. They can't run fast enough to catch me this time. Jackson solidifies her commentary on gender and automobility by showcasing how it provides Eleanor the illusion of autonomy, but ultimately represses her through her own mind and past. The final car ride is not as long as the first, but it has a lasting impact on the reader because it adheres to a form of liberation revitalized in Gothic literature: death. She does not have the good ending that results in her healing or living a fulfilled life, but it does provide an appropriate escape for her circumstances. Marriage and motherhood are widely regarded as two of the most rewarding things that a woman can do with her life, but Jackson uses the automobile to comment on the historical imbalance of autonomy. Women have always had the capability of choosing, per se, but society has shaped the identity of women into being the perfect daughter, wife, mother, and model, leaving the woman nothing left for herself. The automobile was originally marketed towards men, yet evolved into a significant tool of progress in feminist history. Autonomy became accessible with the invention of the car, as it provided the ability to experience life outside of the household bubble women were confined to, despite how women continued to be shamed by propaganda and prejudicial norms. Authors like Jackson are able to combat misogyny geared towards women drivers by depicting them in their work. The car has come to symbolize mobility and progression, a concept unwelcome for characters like Eleanor who struggle with isolation and identity. All of the women characters in Hill House are curated to showcase the struggles women face, but Eleanor's relationship with the car and automobility remains one of the most impactful elements of the novel because of the historical relationships between women of the 1950s and personal connections with the author. Jackson's battles are materialized in Eleanor's character, which is the most integral part of analyzing Hill House because it helps establish the foundation needed to discuss politics and social issues in and outside of creative literature. Thank you.